Thursday. I'm super excited to be here with Francisco. Francisco Mafus. Man, I was practicing his name. It's a really cool and interesting name, and maybe there's a good story behind it. Maybe like your ancestors were explorers from somewhere, and I'm sure there's a great story behind a lot of things that you do, Francisco, because that's obviously something you think about being a storyteller. But anyway, guys, I'm just really happy to have Francisco here with us on the show today. I mean, he's someone that I started following his content at least 6 months ago or so, and he's someone that I see has this perfect blend of being personable and connecting and on this emotional level, but then able to put in a very valuable content that helps you actually take action and improve what you're doing as a professional. Like this guy, not only is he funny and shows up in his content in a way that we can relate to, but he's also up on stages talking for some of the biggest companies in the world. So Francisco, again, you're someone that I really look up to as far as a marketer and a storyteller, and I'm really happy for you to be here. And he is Brazilian, and as you guys know, my family is all from Brazil, and I've been here in Rio for a year, so that makes me feel a bit like we're connected, and I appreciate that too. But so anyway, Francisco, how the hell are you? How's everything going?
I'm all right. I hadn't quite realized or paid enough attention that you are in Rio. So now that I have found that out, I am jealous, is what I am. That's how I started this conversation, from a point of jealousy. Even though I live in Barcelona, which is one of the other cities that are very cool on its own, but is also by the ocean. But I have a special place in my heart for Rio de Janeiro, and I haven't been for a very long time. So there you go.
Well, nice, man. You've always, I'm sure you've got a lot of friends here, but you got a place with me with me as well. I mean, I live in Copacabana. I'm 5 minutes from Posto Cinco over here. And I woke up this morning, I went and I did a little workout on those workout stations and went for a swim. And later today, I'm going to go out to a Club Flamengo and go do a beach tennis lesson, and all is good. So guys, when Francisco is saying it's a good life here in Rio, there's no exaggeration. It is quite nice. But I'm sure Barcelona is great too. And I'd love to, of course, go out there and visit there someday. But so man, let's move into some storytelling here, some marketing stuff. I mean, obviously this is something that I do too. I'm not so focused on, on storytelling, but I know that is the most powerful way to connect with people. And not only the most powerful way, but it's the most fun. I mean, I can't, and it's difficult, but it's the most fun. And I try to create content that's more maybe basic and broad, maybe more informational, more leadership based, and more just like rah stuff. But every time I try, I can't do it. I just get lost in where's some kind of story. What's something from me, from a client, from the world that I can connect to tell a lesson. And it's just so fun. And I know that it works so well. So first thing I wanted to bring up for you and what you do is in your tagline, you have this idea of saying that you're helping people become more interesting than Netflix. And maybe I'll explain what I mean a bit later, but why do you say that? And what do you mean by that?
So I think this came out of I don't know if I can call it a bit, but it's a part of, it's something I said on a podcast, and then it became part of my keynote, or most of my keynotes, where I talk about how, on the one hand, we can, most of us watch Netflix or something like Netflix every night, and we can do it for hours and hours on end. We have no issues with our attention when that's what we're doing. But very few people, if anyone at all, can actually watch a business meeting or presentation for 10 minutes without checking their phones, doodling, or having their minds wander. And I had this thing, it's why can we spend hours watching something on Netflix, but we can't last a few minutes in a business meeting? And it's to do with how the information and how the content is being communicated. There's nothing inherently wrong with business. Business can be more exciting than real life in many cases. It's just how it's communicated, and that's how I usually launch into the whole, the problem with the way most business communicate is that it's very boring, it's not memorable, it doesn't inspire people. Whereas storytelling can do all those things. So I had this thing in my mind, and then I was talking to someone on the podcast about sort of the tagline of LinkedIn. And I think I was using something slightly different at the time. I was using something like, tell the story and grow your business. And then I was just thinking, I know I could use something kind of sexier or something a bit more interesting, like maybe, I don't know, become more interesting than Netflix. And he really liked it. And I said, okay, fine, I'll change it and see how that plays out. And as you were the living proof of, it resonates with a lot of people. It does get people's attention, and some people kind of get what I mean by that, but not always. They're like, okay, I think I know what you mean, but tell me more, which is not necessarily a great tagline for a business, because you want people to understand a little better what is it that you're doing. But when it comes to social media, it tends to work very well, because if people look at that, they want to understand more. And if I'm talking to someone out in the world and they say, what do you do? And I say, I help people become more interested in the Netflix. It's very rare that someone's going to go, okay, I'm a dentist. Like that's never gonna end that. It's like, what do you mean by that?
Mhm.
Right? Even if they're
Yes.
thinking that sounds a bit douchey. What do you mean by that? Right? But they will want to know more. And that's in that sense, a sort of like an elevator pitch type of thing. It works well.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. Absolutely. Definitely a great hook and a great conversation starter. And it paints a good visual picture. Like I think we think, oh, people go on Netflix binges and we just want to watch more and more and more Netflix. Like Netflix is really interesting. Like, what do you mean become more interesting than Netflix? Okay, that really makes me think that people are going to want to pay attention to me, and they're going to want to pay attention to me again and again and again. I think that's a big part of our content, and the way we got to present is people need to look forward to wanting to see us or to listen to us. Man, this kind of brings up a lot of threads, but well, I mean, maybe starting with this one, aren't some people just boring? Like, how can you become an interesting speaker? Aren't there just some like, I've grown up and I've done a lot of work on myself to become an interesting, fun person, to develop my personality and to take risks, talking to others and practicing and working on my body language and my charisma and all this stuff. Like, how can someone who's just not great at telling stories just become an interesting storyteller?
Well, I think the first point I would say is that for the vast majority of people, they shouldn't be bothered about becoming more interesting. Becoming more interested is usually more than enough for the vast majority of interactions you have. If you only ask more questions and listen with attention, most people will like you a lot more than they like almost anyone else, and that requires very little training and very little charisma, if we want to call it that way. But if you're in the position that you have to speak and you have to present things, then the answer is kind of simple. It's you want to become better at storytelling, you should do what you should do if you want to become better at anything. You learn enough so you know how to practice, and then you practice. That's it. I mean, I have written proof that I wasn't anywhere near as good a storyteller a few years ago than I am now, because I wrote a book. This was maybe 3-4 years ago, and it was mostly focused on public speaking, but there was a lot about storytelling in there. And there's one particular story that it took me about a page to tell, and then I wanted to make a LinkedIn post to that story a few years later, and I was able to tell that story in about 12 lines of dialogue, which made it substantially better than how it was originally. And most people, if you ask them, will assume that I've always been a great storyteller or whatever. That's not true. That's definitely not true. But I listened to a lot of podcasts about it. I read books about it. I practiced it both on social media, professionally, in my talks, in my speeches, and I got better. So people want to get better. They just need to get some idea of what works and try that. And if that works, do more of it. If that doesn't work, try and figure out why by asking someone you trust. You don't need to pay anybody, listen to a podcast, ask someone you trust about, does the story work? Is it interesting? Which part of it is boring? It's not rocket science, but it does involve some amount of effort, which is what a lot of people are not necessarily willing to put in.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of trouble around storytelling and is just doing it. I mean, it seems so simple. We all know that, hey, we used to tell stories around the fire, and that's how we used to always connect. And, that's the best way to connect emotionally with someone, and you close them logically and all of that. And then there are people that create content and they say, well, I don't know how to do it. And I've kind of always thought of 3 ways, or at least places, that you can find stories that work really well. I mean, basically, like, from yourself. So like personal stories, stuff that's happened in your life. And the whole thing about the personal life story doesn't have to be like, I was 5 years old and then I was 7 years old and this happened, and 12 years old this happened. Like, the personal stories can happen every day, like on your way to work. Somebody cuts you off on the way to work, and then, you practice that one meditation technique, and then that's something that now you teach as a mindset practice to all of your clients. Or whatever, something that happens in the daily. And then, of course, there's stuff that happens with your clients, like when you're actually physically working with them. You just had a session with them yesterday, and they brought up this question of, how do I do this, RC? And then all of a sudden you explain what their question was. I mean, what an easy way to start a story there, those interactions. And then I think there's the media too. There's movies or books or current news stories. And that's my favorite place to find stories. Is I can literally just open up a book, turn to a page, and then something sparks in my mind of, here's a metaphor, here's an analogy of how I can take what I just read in The Little Prince. I'm reading The Little Prince in Portuguese right now, so I can practice that. And that's just a classic book from me, but I can, I'm going to do that today and open it up and take a metaphor and create some kind of content about it. So,
right. So let me give you some more practical stuff. And to begin with, let me just say that this argument of we used to tell stories around the fire is, I mean, it's true, but it's also absolute nonsense, because we also used to hunt mammoth. We also used to walk around without actual clothes. None of us do any of these things today, and we're not prepared to do any of these things.
If you're in Rio, we're still walking around without clothes.
Human beings used to hunt antelope by running them to death, literally. Right? Most of us can't run 5 blocks without, being completely out of breath. So the fact that cavemen and women used to do something is no parameter for what should or shouldn't work now. Having said that, what I think most people get wrong when they look for stories is they don't really know what they're looking for. They're looking for something that is very epic, or something that is very out of the ordinary. And then your brain doesn't have a folder for stories. So the way I look for stories is usually this. A story is a real life example that makes a point. So what is the point you're trying to make? So let's say you're trying to make a point that, I don't know, something about, you said meditation. Okay, so you want to make a point that meditation is a useful tool to deal with everyday problems. Okay, now you've got 2 very easy routes to go down. The first one is, do you have an example of that actually being the case for you? You were having a problem, or a client of yours was having an everyday problem, and meditation was the thing that fixed it. Okay, so you can just share that example. Okay, now, how to make that story interesting, there's other things we need to think about, but that's the story, is this client or you were having this everyday problem. The other things you tried didn't work, and then you tried meditation and it worked. The other way of doing it is simply, do you have an example of whatever else you were trying to do not working? So maybe it becomes about, I have this problem. I've tried all these things, nothing worked. Or maybe I had this problem. It got me into trouble in my life. And that's when I realized something needed to change. And that's when you started going down the road of, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. And I eventually found meditation. Okay. So either when did it work, or when did it not work, so much that forced you to find a solution. So those two are very specific ways to look for stories. And then one additional tip for finding a story that is interesting to other people is, don't tell me how it was for years, tell me how it was once. So are you talking about how crazy your family is? Great. Don't tell me how it was for your whole childhood. Tell me how it was during Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving or whatever. One Christmas dinner or one Thanksgiving. Do you want to tell me about a horrible boss you had? Don't tell me how it was for the 6 months you worked there. Tell me about one performance review that went horribly wrong. Okay? And if you do that and you make sure there's a clear point in there, that's the basis of any decent storytelling. And now I can see that there's a big sunbeam right in my face, which is what I told you I was fighting against when I set up for the meeting.
It's like, yeah, it's like right in your eyes. You know, it's like
Yes,
reminds me
I'm
of
gonna move slightly, so I'm avoiding it. There we go.
it was kind of cool. It was like, you know, in the Addams Family, like the wife, like there's always, her eyes are always perfectly lit up right there.
Yes,
It's kind of like that as you're like harping on this storytelling.
I was going through an illuminating moment for the audience. And,
You know, I
just
felt
happening
illuminated. I think we were all very illuminated in that moment. I think so. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's nice. So there's all these ways that we can find stories, and specificity was something I really picked up out of what you just said. Is that, yeah, sometimes when we're trying to tell a good story, we think so broad. We think of this epic story, and we get too caught up in how do I even tell that. But instead, it seems like it's more about telling specific stories, little bite-sized pieces of stories, not like about the feelings of Christmas with your family, but like what happened at Christmas 2 weeks ago when you were at the table eating dinner, when your sister said that thing and it reminded you of that thing. You're like, what's that story? And that's how simple story can be, and that's how simple it should be. I think, yeah, everyone thinks that it needs to be some big complicated thing, and a story has a structure. And I mean, of course it does, you know, beginning, middle, and end, and some tension in the roller coaster or whatever. But really, it's just, instead of listing points of like action steps you can take to do something, stuff that you can Google, you know, why not use some personal experience to get your point across and create an emotional connection, because it's fun and it feels good too. It just feels good to express yourself in that way and connect with people, and practically it resonates and it sells too. So that's kind of another thing I wanted to ask for you. So obviously, you know, you're running a business, you're teaching people storytelling, and you're on LinkedIn to not only express and create, but to connect with clients. So how do you turn your stories into pieces of content that sell, that attract people to want to work with you?
So again, there's a few different ways to answer that question, but the simplest way is that one of the most important things you need to do when you're trying to sell anything or market anything is offer social proof. You know, people don't want your theory of how this works. They want to see that it works. And business has known for a very long time about case studies. Now, a story is just a substantially more interesting case study. You know, I'm telling you that social media marketing works, that you can sell yourself as a consultant or a coach or whatever through social media. Now, I can tell you that, or I can just share a story of me gaining clients through social media by doing whatever I do. That's a lot more convincing because it's social proof. Okay, and also can happen to come in the form of a story, which is a lot more engaging for the audience. So that's one point. Stories can be one type of social proof. The other thing is, theories are not particularly memorable. Opinions in general, not particularly memorable. Stories are. So if you're trying to explain something that you think is important, that you want your audience to remember, is there a story that you can use to illustrate that? Because if you can find a story from your life, from the media, from your clients, then that's going to be more memorable and more easily understood by your audience. And you want that with whatever type of marketing or messaging you're using. And it has one additional advantage, which is you don't need to be creative. You don't need to be super smart with your copywriting. You don't need to have a talent for taglines. All you need to do is be able to find a story that proves your point. And if what you're talking about has any basis in reality, if you're not just full of hot air, you should have plenty of stories, either from your business or from other people doing a similar business that you can use as examples of what you're trying to say. So what storytelling does is it allows you to turn most things that happen in your business and in your personal life to social proof and into engaging content. And they also make it easier for you to become a more interesting and engaging communicator without you having to become very good at copywriting, without you having to become super funny or anything like that, because the story is doing most of the work.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think it's easy to get lost in the copywriting and creating stories and trying to inject really clever headlines and calls to action and create offers, and like all that stuff is really important. And that's stuff that I'm really good at. Like, I'm a really good copywriter, and I'm really good at coming up with headlines and creating offers and having strong calls to action and weaving in stories and doing all of that. But one thing that I think I'm missing in my content is, even though I tell stories, I don't do a good enough job connecting personally, like telling my personal stories. And on one side, I do sometimes, and I'm getting better at it, but I see a lot of creators on LinkedIn who, they get a lot of likes and a lot of attention and, a lot of comments and a lot of engagement. And I know they're getting business without needing to really write any copy, without needing to have any of that stuff. And they got people reaching out to them. And that's really something that I'm trying to figure out more. So but I mean, it seems like it's simple. Like, do I need to let go of maybe my copy focus, my selling focus, and more just be totally more open and personal in my content? Or can I keep a mix? Like, what do you think could be missing from someone who is like me, who creates a lot of copy style writing, but isn't quite, connecting or landing with the audience?
I think there are many reasons why someone's content might not be connecting with an audience. I think one potential issue a lot of people have is a lack of clarity. So it's not obvious to your audience I'm not saying you specifically, but people putting content out there. It's not obvious to your audience what is it that you do. To a lot of people, the issue is that it's not obvious who you do it for. So maybe people, you do copy for who specifically. So what's the type of person or business or company that hires you specifically? It might be that what makes you different from other people is not clear, because there's like people that coach on communication or storytelling or copywriters. There might be a million of us on LinkedIn, right? So all these things could be true, and they have nothing to do with your content. They could be that your content is amazing, but the people that engage with it go like, "Oh, I really enjoy this. This is fun. I have no idea if this guy is for me." Right? And I don't know, or either it is not for me, but I enjoy the content anyway, or I don't even know who this is for, but I enjoy the content anyway. Okay, so that all those things could be true. When it comes to should you focus more on copy, should you be more personal, I think it's important that people get your personality when we're dealing with social media, because it's supposed to be social. It's supposed to be connecting with people, which is why company profiles don't tend to gain anywhere near as much traction as personal profiles. There are exceptions to that. You get people like Tony Chocolonely, it's, the anti-slavery or slavery-free chocolate brand from the Netherlands, who have thousands and thousands of people who follow them, and every post they do, it doesn't go viral, gets close to viral, but it comes across with a very clear personality. And I think you can never tell a story and be very sort of copy focused, as you said, but people get your personality very clearly, and that can be a combination of how the type of humor you have, the specific writing style you have. So I don't think there's one specific answer to that question, and without knowing which creators you're thinking of, it's difficult to say what is it that they do that attracts people to them. And some of them might be very personal, some of them might not be really personal at all, right? I know people that go viral with almost every single post, and their content is not particularly personal, like Justin Welsh, right? But he's super, super clear on what he does, who he does it for, and the results he's had, or he personally had. He doesn't really offer social proof much, right? And there are other people like Leah Turner who are very personal in the stuff they put out there. So I don't think there's one specific rule, but clarity is one that I think is the mistake most people have when it comes to this platform, but also business in general.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, as far as creating content, and let's see, as far as, I think as far as using LinkedIn for business and for creating content and using LinkedIn for business, like what most people lack is, yes, that clarity on who they're talking to and what it is about them that is unique and better than the competition. Like, why should someone work with them over everyone else? What is their unique method of doing something that is different from everyone else? Like, what kind of result are you going to get when you actually work with this person and engage with them? And because I think a lot of people, on the one hand, yes, like I see creators and they get a lot of likes and comments and they have this big community, and I know that they're getting leads, but I've also talked to people that have like 150,000 followers. And one lady I was talking to a couple months ago, she's like, yeah, RC, I've got all these followers, but I get on calls with people. Most of them don't even know what I do, or they're asking me for free advice, or they're just like someone who I have no interest in working with at all. So there's this balance of really identifying who you serve, what's that starving market, who's that person that you can help the most, and then connecting that with what you do that's different, and why someone should choose you over everyone else. And then you find that match, and then I think you can start really creating content that's focused. Then you get clear on what stories you should tell, and because again, if you're getting someone a kind of result, then you're like, this is the perfect analogy to bring this point home that's going to connect with my audience and get them to want to reach out to me and potentially work with me.
One I'm saying easy but simple enough way to think about content is you think about what is it that you do. So what are all the problems that you help people fix? What are all the ways that other people try to fix those problems that you don't agree with? So what is everybody getting wrong, either from the audience side or your competition? What are popular opinions that you completely disagree with when it comes to this problem that you're fixing? And if you just list those things, then there's a whole bunch of points there that you can try and make in your posts. Now, some people just go and talk about those things, which is fine, but I would always say, okay, what example have you got that backs up whatever you're talking about? So if you think this particular way of fixing the problem is wrong, what makes you say that? Is it just your opinion, or have you got personal experience with this? Have you got professional experience with this? Have you seen something else in the industry that proves your point? Because if you have those examples, then tell The content is the example. The content is that story, okay? And then that will back up the point you're making. The other way of thinking about this is, if you don't need to talk that much about how you fix things, but you just need to talk about the problem in a way that is different than everybody else talks about the problem. So I had a podcast a while back with Richard Mulholland, and he had this idea that the mistake a lot of people make is they keep talking about problems that other people talk about. So if you're talking about marketing problems, a million other people are talking about marketing problems. So if they agree with you, they can go to any one of those people to solve that problem. But if you're the only one talking about either a specific problem or a problem looked at from a completely different angle, then naturally you're the person who has made them aware of the problem. When they want to fix it, they will go to you first. Like, no one has ever told me that this was the problem. Now I think I need to fix this problem. I'm going to go to this guy who was the first person I ever heard talking about the problem. You're not going to say, well, Francisco talks about storytelling. Let me talk to him if he also thinks this is a problem. And if he can, no, that's not how people's brains work. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that the problem with my marketing is that I haven't established what my core message is. Well, RC is the guy talking about core messaging, so I'm going to go talk to him, right? That's how people's brains work. So you don't need to have a unique way of solving things. You just have to have either a unique problem you solve or a unique way of looking at the problem other people solve, and then you get associated with that, and then people come to you when they need that help.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that makes me think of some of the video guys that I follow, like Travis Lochner, he's like very with doing live streams, and this other guy, Alex Sheridan, I think. And, he's got like the short clip videos that's like got all this stuff like flying around in it. And it's like, they're solving the same problem, but they're talking about video and they're talking about live. And that's just like, okay, you have a content creation problem. Well, you should try just doing a live once a week and cutting up all the clips. And hey, that's what we specialize in, and how to set all that up. And it's like, okay, that's a different problem that could resonate with me. So I feel that.
I think it's the problem a lot of people come up against is it's very easy to talk about solutions. And this is a problem I come up against too sometimes, is it's easy to talk about solutions without having been clear about what the problem is, right? It's easy to talk about storytelling. It's easy to talk about public speaking. It's easy to talk about video editing or whatever. But a lot of people they're not walking around going, I have a video editing problem. I have a storytelling problem. And if you don't dig a bit deeper and make them see, when you went and spent hours and hours preparing this meeting with your team, and then you had the meeting, and a week later, nothing changed. Everybody was doing the exact same things they were before, as if they didn't really care what you told them. But that the problem is not that they don't care about you or about working with you, is that the message just didn't stick. They either didn't pay enough attention, or they don't remember it, or you didn't inspire them enough for them to change anything. Okay, that is the problem. Now, one way to fix that problem is storytelling. It's not the only way, but it's one of the ways. Now people go, oh, I've had this problem last week, and now they want your help. But if I just talk about storytelling, then a lot of people are missing that step, and it's never going to resonate with them as a potential solution.
Yeah. You're really hitting me hard on this differentiation aspect, like that. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking my stuff, it's different. I have a different angle, but how well am I actually articulating how different what I'm doing is? Like, there is difference, but I think that we all need to do a better job of finding that different angle. And tell a story, and it's got to be the best way to do it, is to use storytelling to show why it's different or demonstrate why it's different. And
I'm not going to say it's the best. it depends on each person, but from my experience, once you learn how to find those stories, it becomes one of the easiest, because you don't have to be creative, you don't have to be funny, all you need to do is identify this thing has happened and this proves the point I'm trying to make. And if this is your job, you should have those things over and over and over again. You're never going to have to come up with content or create content, you just have to find it. And that is a lot easier, I think, for a lot of people than trying to be creative all the time.
Yeah. So I've got two more things in mind that I want to ask. One's quick, one's a little bit deeper. But so really, what is your process like creating content on the daily? So me, I'm a very free creator, you could say. I've tried many times to be very structured and, hey, this day I'm going to post this day this. Maybe every Monday I should talk about my mission, and every Friday I should do, Tip Tuesday, something like that. So what's your process like on the day-to-day in creating and posting? And short term, and then how does that go into the long term?
So I've tried different things. I'm not as structured as perhaps I should be, but one thing that helps is producing regular content that can become social media content. So I have the podcast, which means that at the very least I can get one little clip from the podcast to post about every week. And depending on the podcast, I can have 3, 4, 5, 6 clips that can become video content whenever I want video content. The other thing that helps is, again, being very clear about the problems you're fixing, because whenever I get a different idea about that problem, or I come up with a new story about it, or something in my personal life that relates to that problem, it becomes very easy to make a post about it. So, for example, what I posted yesterday, so on Wednesday the 11th, was a picture of me with the world's cutest chainsaw, and it was kind of a very basic thing. It's like I bought a barbecue that burns wood, so I needed to chop some wood, and I started, I didn't do any research, I just didn't want to spend that much money, so I bought a tiny little axe that didn't really cut it. Then I bought some other weird contraption that also didn't work, and then eventually I said, okay, I'm spending all this time doing this, I should just find what seems to work better based on the research and just spend the money. And that was a chainsaw, which shouldn't have been a massive surprise to me. And then I went and bought a chainsaw, and lo and behold, it started working immediately. Way better than anything I had tried before. Now, a lot of people make that same mistake when it comes to, and in my case, I was talking about presentations, right? Or communication. You try all these different things, you try to do the slides, and you do the theories, and you try the creative stuff, but actually, what has worked for a very long time is storytelling. Okay, sometimes you just have to buy the chainsaw, and storytelling you won't be putting any of your fingers to risk. Now, I could have used that exact same example to spending money on the right thing. Because a lot of people don't spend money on an expert, and then they waste hours, and they eventually spend more money than if they had just paid for the expert. I could have gone that way too, right? And that would be a story that anybody can use. So I have a habit of writing down stuff that happens on a daily basis, and if I can make a direct connection between that and what I do, or the problems I help people fix, those become stories. And if you look at my content, it's very rare that at least one of the 3, 4 posts I do every week are not a personal story. So one is a video from the podcast, maybe 2. One is a little story that I'm connecting to what I do and the problems I help people solve. The 3rd or 4th, again, it depends. There's stuff that's happening in my life. I'm doing keynote somewhere, so maybe it's a picture of a keynote with a little story connected to that, or some creative angle I found. So in a sense, it's repurpose content from other things you're creating, find little things that happen in your personal professional life that connect to the work you're doing, and then social proof. Where are you working? What clients are you helping? Have you read anything that connects to this business you're talking about? And if you do that on a regular basis and you're actually working, finding stuff for 3-4 posts a week shouldn't be particularly hard. Okay, and then you can actually just record 1 hour talking to someone or to yourself on Zoom, where you're just talking about all the problems your clients have, and then just clip out 1 minute at a time, 2 minutes at a time, and post those. Right, like just talk about the things you do. It won't be the most creative thing ever, but you can create a lot of volume of content if you do something like that. So what shouldn't be the case is that every single day you look at LinkedIn and think, what am I going to post about today? Because that's just not a particularly productive process, I don't think.
True. Yeah. That's one of the worst feelings, to be thinking, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to do? And then you start doing the writing, and then it's difficult and it's hard. I mean, creating content, it's not the easiest thing on the fly, but when you have these backup things, when you've got a show that you're doing every week or even every couple weeks, and I loved your idea of just, you don't even need a guest. You can just go live by yourself, or you can just record yourself through Zoom and just talk about a bunch of different topics and cut up those clips. Like, it's a great way to do it in batch content. Or you can be like me and just, do a mix of both, but just kind of go on the fly, open up a book, let divine, there's a funny thing they say about divine inspiration is that it happens. Somebody said I get divine inspiration sparks me at 7 a.m. every single morning, something like that. Just that this idea of being consistent.
Yes.
Okay, so last thing here, Francisco, is something that I just wanted to ask about. Something we talked about before we went on, but just about your why with storytelling, why you are doing what you're doing, and I want to harp on that myself here a little bit, because for me, what I do in marketing is all about spreading good ideas, like the big ideas that there's a lot of hate and pain and war in the world because of fear, because we don't understand each other. We're not able to communicate with each other effectively, and that comes because we don't have interaction. We don't have stories where we hear about people that are living in different countries, and we don't actually understand that we are very, very similar in our core. We all want to love, and we want to be loved, and we want to be successful at work. And we can understand that, but then be able to celebrate our differences as well, and be able to look at each other and not be afraid of what's different, but celebrate and love what's different. So that's why I love stories. That's why I love marketing and doing what I'm doing, so I can create that connection for people and hopefully create more peace in the world. So that's one big idea. The other is, linking to what you said with Netflix, is I think there's a lot of messages that we're bombarded with kind of every day, things that we see not only in media and news stories and the internet, with very clickbaity headlines and kind of junk food storytelling. But I mean, even in normal everyday things like ideas in movies that are really popular, or music, it's I think we can all do a better job of questioning what we're consuming and listening to. And I think it's up to us to give our perspective and share what we really think is good and righteous, and share that with others, and create our own tribe with our own ideas. I can't see how I can change everyone else, but I can see how I can share what I know and what I think to be true, and spread that to as many people as possible. So I'm here to help empower others to do that and share their message and light. So thank you, Francisco, for being here with me so I could express that. And now I want to turn that to you. What is your kind of why and reason for doing this?
It's substantially less inspiring than yours. I guess it's just that I don't like to be bored. I don't think anybody likes to be bored. Doesn't matter if it's personally or professionally. And there's just so much out there that is incredibly boring. And I don't say this just from an entertaining point of view. Yes, it's great to be entertained, but that's not, to me, I think that's the shallow understanding of what boring or boredom is. when you are bored, you're not engaged, and usually you're also not present. And I think a lot of people have an incredibly underwhelming view or unflattering view of their own lives, because they haven't learned to find the excitement or in the stories in their own lives. So stuff happens all the time, and if you look at my content, I'm not talking about any type of experience that other people haven't had, but I see them and I realize something just happened here and it's interesting. I can learn something from it, and at the very least, I can have a laugh about it and other people can too. So I put them, I record them, I share them with other people, and that makes my life feel a lot richer. And I get the response I get from a lot of people is like, oh, you always have all these stories, all your life is, all this stuff is happening. No, it's not. My life is not more interesting than almost anyone else's, but I've learned how to find the stories in my life, and that makes my life many things, but boring is very rarely one of them. And the more I do the storytelling stuff, the more I realize that if people could just learn how to find the stories and tell the stories of what they do and the work they do, they will see them the way other people can see them, which is anything other than boring. So I'm not necessarily trying to change the world in any great way, but I genuinely believe that if everybody learned how to find, craft, and tell the stories that make up their personal and professional lives, they would be significantly happier. They would also make the people around them significantly happier. And as a nice byproduct of all of that, they would become substantially more effective as communicators. And there are very few jobs that couldn't benefit from you being a better communicator. So I don't think, I think I fell into that purpose out of starting from a very basic thing of I don't want to be bored and I don't want other people to be bored. But I truly believe that those things are actually true.
Yeah, man. No, that's awesome. Like that is such a huge thing to help people understand, greatness in their life. Like really and I think that it's just about it's about looking for it. It's like practicing gratitude. It's like looking around and realizing that you have so much abundance in your life. And when you start to go and you start to look for those stories and you tell those stories, you do that. Like you empower yourself to realize that normal life is extraordinary life. I think that's the point. Normal is extraordinary. We all have this. Man, I'd love to talk a lot more. But we're gonna have to end it here. Yeah, Francisco, thanks again so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. I'm excited to look back on this talk and share some clips too for the rest of everyone out here.
Sure, man. Pleasure to have you. I'm so used to being the host that I don't even know what to say when I leave these things. Oh, it was fun. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. All right, man. We'll do it again soon.